it is not very easy to summarize 1 hour lecture in a few words, but the main point of my lecture was why the integrity approach is important for the State Audit Office of Hungary and why proved it to be successful. The main idea is that the fight against corruption is, of course, a moral and a legal duty of any supreme audit institutions, and there are different methods for doing so. One approach is the traditional one, in which the state organization, the state authorities, tries to fight against corruption at the individual level, so they try to detect certain corruption cases and punish those who made these corruption activities. Of course, it is one option, and it's a very important one, because if there is corruption, there must be punishment and detection and so on. But as you know, that there is corruption everywhere, and therefore this approach did not prove very efficient, and therefore a new approach can be more effective. And we learned something from the Dutch Supreme Audit Institution, which seemed to us more effective than the traditional approach. And it is the integrity approach, which is used in the Netherlands, and now it is used in other 50 countries all over the world, because these Supreme Audit institutions were also convinced that this approach could be more effective. What integrity is? It can be the first question. Integrity is the opposite of corruption, the opposite of fraud, which means that integrity means a kind of wholeness, the wholeness of the organization, and which means that all the activities of the organization are based on a set of values, and the organization itself and their employees, their managers are following these values, and these values are reflected in the activities of the organization. And how can we reach a situation in which an organization really strengthens its integrity? And this approach is the integrity approach, which means that the organization, and first of all the managers of the organization, have to be aware of the corruption risk, namely that their activities, for example, the activity of collecting taxes, the activity of giving subsidies, the activity of issuing certain permissions, they are threatened by the corruption. So there is a kind of inherent, coherent corruption risk in these activities, because there are certain persons who would like to bribe, for example, the civil servant who is responsible for these kind of activities. So the first step of this approach is just to be aware where these risks are, which means that mapping this corruption risk and analyzing the risk. So it's a kind of risk assessment approach.